Hello, I'm Aaron Koopmen from Clinier Group, and we are talking about the certification journey and wanting to dive into a topic that we get a lot of questions about, which is DO-178 software certification. We are seeing a lot of interest out there on this topic and also seeing a lot of folks looking for candidates to hire and interview. And one of the things we want to share in this discussion is what should you be looking for in your candidates and what kind of questions should you be asking when you're interviewing for this kind of position. Lucky to be joined by Michael Bauer, who is an expert in this field and part of the Clinier team, bringing this expertise to our clients and hopefully providing some helpful information for you today. Hello, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you, Aaron, and thank you everyone for tuning in to listen. To mention a few points about my background, I studied electrical engineering and embedded systems at the University of Washington, and I've been working in the aerospace field for about 20 years now, ranging from working as a subsystem supplier to the traditional OEMs early on, and now fielding some work in the advanced air mobility space, which is quite interesting. And I'm very pleased to be part of the Clinier Group.
Well, I think of DO-178 as kind of software compliance, but I know it's much bigger, broader, and more nuanced than that. Can you kind of explain it at a high level, what DO-178 means in terms of a client wanting to certify, show compliance to DO-178, and also how the FAA sees it?
I'd love to. Essentially, at its most basic point, we're using a framework of DO-178 to develop safety critical software. And from a more specific standpoint, what that is essentially an acceptable means of compliance to demonstrate airworthiness for the software. It is a framework that is designed to ensure that the software is safe, it's verified, and it's validated.
We have a lot of folks coming into the industry from other industries coming into specifically like the air mobility space from traditional software development, and they bring different experience to the space that's different from aerospace software certification. What makes aerospace certification different than, say, other software development in the industry?
Good question. I'd say number one, it's an absolute focus on safety and oversight. There's a lot of interactions with formal processes, both within the team, and then also interaction with a quality organization, as well as the oversight of the governing bodies for the certification effort. In the software itself, we really constrict ourselves to achieve that safety and focus on having a deterministic behavior. And all of the activities are governed by formal processes. And really what that adds is additional, I'd say, heavy documentation. In reality, coding is probably 10% or less of our actual effort. And the actual verification, and some people think of that as testing as well, accounts for probably 50% or greater of the activity. There's actually a joke in the industry that when the weight of the paperwork matches the weight of the aircraft, then you can start thinking about flying. And finally, I would add that the projects tend to be long in nature. So we're talking on the order of years as opposed to months. And so that's a little bit different than some other software projects.
You talked about the verification elements. What are some other important aspects of DO-178 that perhaps folks new to certification or new to software certification should know about?
Sure. Well, I'd start with actually the inputs to software, and that's the traditionally seen as the system engineering aspect. And that includes a safety analysis for the functions of which the system will supply, dividing that into architecture and creating requirements and allocating those to different items. And so that's a very important part of the process. And then up front for the software effort, there's a series of planning activities that occur. And that's really important to put down on paper because in the end, the team is going to follow those plans and be audited to those plans once they're accepted. So those are very important aspects. I'd say also requirements, which people may put a little bit less emphasis in other industries sometimes, and looking more at the code product itself. But I would say the requirements stand out in my mind because they really drive the flow into lower level activities, including the code, and then they form the basis for the verification and the testing effort. Traceability is also an important aspect. And what that means is that we write requirements and flow that down into code, and that we ensure that we do not have additional code that doesn't have requirements. And that matches with that verification aspect because that will drive a completeness of test.
You talked about coding being 10% or less of the actual process. And I know a lot of folks think some of the important aspects are getting good development folks. What are and you're saying no, that's a small bit of it. It's very process heavy and verification heavy. What are some of the other challenges that folks might not immediately be aware of when they're looking at DO-178 regulations and compliance?
Yeah, I would say that cost is something that we need to be aware of. And of course, we try to minimize as best we can. But when you have more formality in the process and more overhead with that, it does drive a greater cost. I would say tools also is an area of focus. Tools help us to become more productive and achieve more and do interesting things. But it also is an area where we want to instill trust in the tool. And so there is an entire supplement to 178 known as DO-330 that is focused on instilling that trust in our usage of the tools and its safety implications in the software. And finally, multi-core. So, this is something that came to the consumer space, a decade ago, roughly, where we have multi-cores in our processor. However, this is something that's making its way into aviation today, where we can essentially reduce the part count, reduce the weight by hosting that software into a multi-core environment, which presents some challenges given that they have shared resources. And we just need to do the proper activities to ensure the right amount of partitioning and safety around those shared resources so that it's safe.
One of the other challenges that comes to us with the inquiries is folks have developed software. They feel like they have working software for a prototype of some sort, and then they are looking into DO-178 certification saying, hey, I've got the software, help me show compliance. What point do you really need to start thinking about DO-178 when you're developing software products and software services for hardware?
That's a very good question, and probably one that most people are facing these days, because doing it at inception is probably adding too much burden. You at that stage don't know everything that you want, and so you want to explore a little bit and validate your ideas of what the product should be. However, you don't want to wait until you're too far down the line when you've spent all of your budget and expect a product. And so you really want to kind of insert sort of in that first, let's say, third of the process where you feel that you've sort of de-risked and identified your system and your architecture to your best, maybe even some prototyping as well for proof of concept. And then you can insert the formalities and gain forward engineering process, which gives you good safety consideration.
There are a lot of new technologies, a lot of new innovations in hardware, air taxis and drones and things like that. But there's also a lot of new developments in the software world in general. And those innovative technologies with innovative hardware pose a lot of challenges, I would assume. What are some of the new challenges you see where the innovations of the hardware and vehicles are meeting new developments in software?
I'd say in the industry, common themes we're seeing include usage of models. So rather than writing code by hand, using a model-based tool, which might help you generate the code automatically for you. And there's a lot of considerations that go into that. Also a supplement from DO-178 supplement that helps supply guidance for that. But also AI and machine learning are very exciting technologies. They're really at the forefront. And we would like to use them in some capacity, but we need to sort of tread slowly and develop regulation and identify where it can best be used on aircraft software. And finally, cybersecurity. So we're moving in towards a new kind of networked world where we have a lot of usage of data buses, common data buses, and so on, and even wireless technologies in some cases. And we need to ensure that we have properly protected our systems and our software against any kind of attacks or other injections that could occur through those means.
Can you explain DAO levels to us and what they mean?
Sure. Well, really, it's rooted in the Code of Federal Regulations, so basically the law. And there's two main aspects that come to mind initially, and those are around continued safe operation of the aircraft and reduced capability of the aircraft. And you want to make those in those orders. Extremely unlikely and unlikely is the terminology they use. And what that boils down to is an amount of rigor that we need to instill in the effort. And we call that design assurance level, or DAO. And that rigor is determined by what your system does. So for the coffee maker, it could probably have very little impact. So it may be a very low level, meaning lower cost and effort associated with it. However, for something controlling the aircraft or aiding in something more important, that would be a more critical level. And so we instill a higher level of rigor.
So if there's any interest in some of this early advice in DO-178 and more questions, please reach out to Michael or myself. And if you're interested in anything having to do with the certification journey, we would love to have a conversation. Please reach out to us or follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll be providing more content to help you and your team on your certification journey. Thank you for your time.